Welcome to the Photography Pricing Show. It is great to have you here. We're live on Friday noon Eastern Standard Time where I answer. I always say that, don't I? Answer your photography questions. And I have a few questions here to dive right into, but the theme of today's show is, should you raise your photography prices? Is it time to do so? And sometimes you need to just re-examine it. Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. And we'll dig into that topic. I want to start off with a question from a student. And then I'll get into our main topic of the day. And then I have a few more questions that I have listed from people during the week who have connected with me on Twitter, as well as on roshsillars.com, where our photography community hangs out. That reminds me, there's another question on Twitter that I wanted to get to. So I'm going to actually kind of work my way over that way during this conversation. But let's get into this question from the student. And that question is, she's starting off her photography career. She's a family photographer. And she doesn't understand specifically about asking for the budget. And she read this in one of my articles about, hey, it's a good, and actually we've talked about that on this show, asking for the budget. And so I would say most of the time, and I'll get into the family portion first, but most of the time when I talk about that, I'm usually referring to commercial jobs. I'm thinking about, like, you're talking to a small business owner, you're talking to a marketing person, and you're trying to figure out, what are their ultimate needs. Sometimes you ask a series of questions that helps you better understand and better qualify that client. And so by asking such questions as, what is your budget? Sometimes you just understand, can they afford you or not? Or maybe their experience with photography. Do they have a set budget? Sometimes they say, we don't have one, you don't know where to start. Well, that means that it's time for you to educate them. You need to share. I mean, a lot of photographers say, well, it's all about educating them. Some people don't want to be educated. However, some people need to be educated. And that's the bottom line. They need to be educated, and you need to take the time to give them the information that they need. Okay, so as far as family photography goes, generally you have your set rates. You understand your various packages. However, when you ask somebody, do you have a budget? You can get a sense at which package they're probably going to be most interested in. And if it's an introductory package, fine. If you have that. Again, going back to the example of the commercial photography or the marketing or any type of photography like that, when asking such questions, you're qualifying them if they can even afford your photography. So if your base price is $2,500, and that's where you start for a wedding, and they're talking about, well, our budget's around $1,000, they may not be a good client for you. So that's a situation where asking the budget is really helpful. But there are situations where, look, you have a senior portrait session, that's your price, and you just let them know what that is. And asking a budget isn't necessarily the necessary in that situation. It's more of, look, it's more for the larger, I guess, items. That's, I guess, where I would go in terms of the family, especially weddings. Understanding where that budget is with a wedding and commercial photography, that most certainly is where you need to go. Okay. But I hope that was relatively clear. I'm doing a few things here as I'm recording just to keep on top of it all. We have a lot to cover. So our topic of the day, should you raise your price? Again, it goes back to our theme again of cost of doing business. Now, I get some pushback on the cost of doing business because a lot of times people think I mean, hey, just figure out what your cost of doing business is and that is your rate. No, that's the baseline that you need to work off of. and then your brand. So once you have that cost of doing business and you understand your level, and you can add more for your brand, and if you're a student, then maybe that brand element is not as high or as valuable. You don't have as much work. But over time, when you're starting to close more and more deals, and those deals get closed a little quicker and easier, for example, weddings or seniors, you're starting to get a reputation, or local businesses are calling you to photograph for their website, or website designers are calling you, and you're getting busy. I think that's a time to really examine your pricing. If it really is easy to close the deal, you probably want to make it a little more difficult. And sincerely, you just take the time to say, hey, maybe I should increase my prices by 10, 20, 30%, 100%. It all depends on, obviously, it's about supply and demand, and you only have so much time available. And so you want to get a premium price while, make hay while the sun is shining. I mean, the fact is, when things are going well, increase those rates. There are other times when people raise their rates. For example, if it's an area you're unsure of and you don't have a photographer that you refer business to. Now, I often recommend that you have a few photographers that you can refer business to, even if they're, people to refer business to in areas in which you are not as strong. I think that's really where we're going here. So if you don't have somebody that you want to refer the business to, or you're thinking, wow, I would like this opportunity. Believe it or not, sometimes it might be better to increase the rate a little bit so you can bring additional support in to make sure you get the job done right. Maybe you're going to want to bring in a more experienced assistant to help you through. Maybe you can hire an assistant or two who has actually lit that kind of a event, or have been through or that kind of product, or have been through a certain type of event, or has photographed at a certain location. A lot of times the experience of assistants can be highly valuable. Maybe you're going into a new town or a series of towns to photograph. The assistants can really truly be your eyes and ears on the ground to help you out and help you scout the location even before you get there, especially if you're hiring local assistants. So that's something to consider also. All right, let's see here. Another question. Okay, so what is a good rate for a wedding? Oh, okay, so we actually talked a little bit about weddings for a moment, and I guess we can continue on that conversation. The average, from what I see, and obviously it depends on where you are, is around $2,500. That's average. I'm not suggesting that's what you charge. I'm suggesting that is the average that I see in the marketplace. In some towns, it's $1,500. In others, it's $3,500 or $4,500. I've seen that as an average rate, just because maybe the community, maybe the economics of that town, that may be the driving factor. And so you'll need to consider that. But if you have that as your base point of understanding, now there's the other part of this equation is, what are those people getting for $2,500? So in some situations, for $2,500, they're getting everything. They're getting albums. They're getting, stuff for the wall. They're getting a session ahead of time. Just a full day. I mean, there are a number of things that could be involved. And in other situations, that's the base price. I show up and I take a few hundred photographs, and that's the $2,500 price. So that's average. But then the second part of the question is, what did they get for that? And there are photographers who charge $2,500 and they give them everything in the kitchen sink. And honestly, they're not making any money at the end of the day. So that's something also to consider in terms of your packages. It's not just the price, but what are they getting for that price? So increasing the value, offering high value for what that person is paying for your time is really important. So you need to consider those things too. But ultimately, you want to make sure that you're covering your costs and you have enough to cover everything, including your time after the event and your time before the event. All those things need to be covered. And a lot of times photographers forget about that. They just say, oh, I'm going to photograph for 8 hours and look at all the money I'm making. and then they give them 12 books and spend 2 weeks doing the post production. Yeah, now you're not even making minimum wage. All right, next question. Let me take a look here on my list. What if the client wants a lower price? Okay, that kind of fits into what we were just talking about. So if a client wants a lower price, that is a situation where, let's say your price is $2,500. Let's stick with the theme. And they say, well, we have $2,000 and that's it. Okay, well, let's say you're offering them a book and you do 10 hours and you do a engagement session. Okay, for $2,500, or excuse me, for $2,000, we'll take off the engagement session and I'll do it for 8 hours. How's that? Now I fit into your budget. That's the way you approach this versus saying, oh, okay, fine, I want the job. Take something off the table. Now they may push back and say, no, we really want that engagement session. You'd say, well, is the 8 hours okay? And they may say, okay, we'll kind of meet in the middle here. There is negotiation and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with negotiations, but you have to be confident enough to take the time to take something off the table and be confident with that decision. Okay. What social media should I use to promote my photography? Okay, this is more of a business question. Obviously, it's not a pricing question. And as you know, and I'm getting more and more business questions. So I'm thrilled to have those. I'd like to talk more business of photography on this channel, although obviously I started it under the pricing header. And I'm sure this is going to evolve more and more based on the questions I'm getting into the business side. And as many of you know, if you are watching this, I have another channel on marketing strategies, and you can check that out. Just follow Rosh.video, put that in your URL, and you'll head on over there to that YouTube channel where I have over 650 videos to support you with various topics, but the main focus is marketing strategies. Okay, so obviously it depends on your community. If you have a strong local community on Facebook, I would highly recommend work with Facebook. Now, Facebook pages is something that I'm not so thrilled with these days. But if you want to do advertising, it's a good way to go. Now, direct advertising, not the thing that I would recommend. However, if you say put 10 things a bride should know, and I think we talked about this in the last couple episodes, 10 things a bride should know, and advertise that, and you gather emails from those people, and their brides. You say, hey, I need your name, email, and hey, when's your wedding? And so you can advertise those people up to maybe 3 months before their wedding, and hopefully maybe you'll get some leads that way. But direct leads from Facebook, it can happen. It depends on the campaign, but I usually like to think of Facebook is not the direct sell. Now, Google, I consider that more of the direct sell. People are searching for something, and I'm offering the solution. Instagram, another excellent place for photographers, but also share behind the scenes in stories. I think that's an excellent way to go too. YouTube can be a good place to go, but that's kind of a longer term strategy. If you really want to show off what you're doing in photography, I highly recommend Instagram. The more you post, the better. I've been just posting my regular stuff regularly each day. And I'm getting more subscribers just by posting a little bit more. I'm seeing an uptick in subscribers. So I see that does work. And so maybe 6-8 times a day is great, but once a day is fine too. You have to work at the pace that you can keep offering good quality imagery. At the point when you start to fade off in terms of your quality, you're just putting stuff up to put stuff up. Remember, this people are going to judge you based on what they see. So I definitely think Facebook, I definitely think Instagram, both are very helpful in terms of your business. All right, question. Again, it's a common question, and I'm sure I'll repeat it just about every video. Is about the cost of doing business, and I think that's a really good one to consider or to talk about. The brief overall view of how you go about this is: look, take everything you can possibly think of as it relates to your photography business, your camera equipment, the insurance. How much do you want to make over that year? So maybe that's maybe you want to make $30,000, $50,000, $75,000 a year. I mean, it depends on where you are in your career. Maybe you want to make $200,000 a year. That's fine too. Take that number, figure out what the expenses are. And remember, as you grow, your expenses increase. So if you're basing your expenses totally on, look, I don't have much, I hardly even have any jobs right now, you have to also factor some of that in and understand that, yes, you will have to have insurance. And yes, you will have to update your equipment and get a new computer and all these things. And so you need to maybe factor in a new computer every 2 to 3 years, new camera every 3 to 4 years. Something like that. Factor all that stuff in, again, all the insurance, what you want to make, and divide that by a reasonable number, 50 or 100. If you're really early in the game, do it by 50. And then that's how much you need to make per day. And you can break that down by hours and even minutes, especially if you're doing little tasks. A lot of times that's really good to figure out how much those little tasks really cost you when people say, hey, could you just do this for me real quick? And you say, oh, no problem. And you hand it off, and you're doing that all the time, and how much time that's taking. So these are things you can also consider in the process. Okay, here's a question from earlier in the week, and I'm looking at Twitter. So an interior design client, I'm doing a shoot for, the architect wants to use some of the images. What should I charge the architect per image to use? Okay, client wants to get into magazines. Okay, so there are a couple of questions here. So the client wants to use photographs for a magazine. Should you charge a premium for that? When it comes to architectural photography, a lot of architects put their work, even interior designers, put their work in magazines or submit their work to local, regional, and national magazines. There are a lot of contests. I usually include that as part of my price. I don't usually put a premium on that because that is pretty much a standard in the business. And so I don't want to necessarily make myself look like I am harder to work with, or not understanding the norms of the business. So I would often say no problem. Just be a part of the package, and make, if you want to write that down, hey, you can use it for publicity and things like that. That's fine. You can use the work. That's just part of the license. And so another question related to this was, I have somebody who wishes to purchase images from the shoot. It's another person that wants to use the images. And that's very common, especially in architectural and interior photography. I see this all the time. And quite honestly, I make a lot of money by selling work, especially when I'm doing magazines, interior architectural work for magazines. A lot of times the builders, the cabinet maker, the refrigerator manufacturer, it's all sorts of people may be very interested in those photographs and the ability to sell to them after the assignment. And unless that person purchases the copyright, then yes, you can resell them. Now, if it's for a magazine or they're going to do ads with your photographs, you want to give them the first right to publish. You want to be very clear. And if people are knocking on your door to use the photographs, chances are they showed them the photographs. You weren't necessarily shopping them around, although there's nothing wrong with that. But have a clear conversation with the client. What's going on? What are their expectations? They may think they own the copyrights. If you've not had that conversation, a lot of times they get the photographs, they think they own them to the level of copyright ownership, and that's not the case. So you need to educate them on that point, and then say, look, the cabinet maker would like to purchase some of those photographs. Is that okay with you? Should I wait a period of time before I resell these photographs? And then the question is, how much do you charge? Well, the answer is at least the same amount you charged your client. And especially, if an architect, you charge them $250, $500, $1,000 a photo, and then you charge the other person, well, I've already made my money, so I'll only charge you $100 for the reprint. Wait a minute. That architect may be a little upset that they had to pay $1,000 for that photograph, and this person only had to pay 100. So definitely charge at least the same amount. So if you charge the architect or the interior designer $500 for the photo, then charge everyone else 500 and let them know this is how much I charge the client. And if they say, well, but you've already been paid, yeah, but it's not fair to my client to charge you less. So I think most people understand that. And so that was an excellent question. It's kind of multiple parts in there. And so thank you so much. You can catch me on Twitter at Rosh Sillars. If you wish to ask questions, you can meet me here every Friday, noon Eastern Standard Time. And I'll be more than happy to answer your questions related to the photography business as well as pricing your photography. Okay, that's it for this week. 20-minute show, pretty straightforward. I certainly enjoy your questions coming in over at roshsillars.com. If you want to just get right here real quickly, just put in price.photography. Kind of like the other show is rosh.video. Well, this is price.photography. We'll get you right to this page. You don't have to search through pricing. Well, you have a great day. I look forward to talking to you next Friday.